Hello everybody, our team name is Undefined,
and our goal was to make multiplayer Monopoly.
So let's firstly consider the hierarchy of our project, and then in this video we will explain the code. The root of our project consists of these files: server.js, .git, package.json, webpack.configuration.js, node modules, which is a very important part in our project, and then public folder. In public folder, you can see the files index.html, scripts which contain JavaScript files such as main.js and other files, styles which is used to give a style to our project. It consists of CSS files, and images which are used in our game, and then sounds to give a background music to our project.
So in our project, we used 5 dependencies. 2 of them are dev dependencies, which are Webpack and Babel. Babel is used to compile JS6 into valid JavaScript file, and we have 3 other dependencies which are expressed to make easy write server, and we use socket.io, so we won't send Ajax requested each time, and the session will remain open. And the third dependency is React, which allows us to write HTML in JavaScript and after compile it.
So now let's take a look at the server.js code. In the beginning, we have to create the servers. So everything is built on top of a simple HTTP server. For example, and yeah, first of all we are building our HTTP server, then building our Express server on top of it, and then our socket.io server is going to listen to that HTTP server, and the HTTP server is going to listen to the port 8080. So yeah, now let's say because we have to have some players, our game is multiplayer, we have to have an array to store them, to store our players in that array. So we create that array, then we create the class for our players. It has a constructor which gets an ID and socket ID, and it sets everything. Sets every constant or variables that we are going to use for our player object, and yeah, our object are going to have a function with move, which is going to get a number and is going to move our change the location of our object. And as you'll see in the main.js code, every socket, every client that is connecting to the server, to the route server, is going to also connect to the socket.io server, and is going to emit an event with name connection, and this connection event is getting a socket, which is our client, and it's going to push a new player object to our players array. And yeah, and we say that whenever our players length is equal to 4, we are going to execute game start function. That is how the game starts. And about the HTTP and Express server, we say that whenever the home the root path is requested, if the player length the amount of players connected to the server is less than 4, we are sending our index.html file, which is going to open the main game, and else if it's more or equal than 4, it's going to send an index.html which says that the game is full, and then after that it's going to use static directory public.
Now let's look to the different types of fields. So here we have a class named regular street, and as you can see there are comments of types. So the constructor of this class gets price, rent, group and index. Then also we have a function by me which gets some player ID which can be from 0 to 3 as we know. And it asks if you want to buy that field, if you can, of course. Then we have a chance array in which we have all chances that we can get. So for example, yeah, they think they can kick you, go forward 3 spaces. So here the move function is called with an integer of 3. So you go forward 3 spaces, and every chance card has a text in it, and every chance card has a functionality in it, so you can see it here. Then we have an class chance in which you show the function show player is working. It just shows the card to you while you are playing, and then we have a train station class. It have a constructor in it, and so the owner of it is null, and price is 200. It means that you can buy the train station by with 200, and it also has an buy me player function in it, so it will ask you if you want to buy it. And also class luxury tax, and why it doesn't have code in it, because it actually doesn't have any functionality related to our server.
So let's continue with class water. Here we initially have then no one owns this place, and price is 150. And if somebody owns that place and other player stands on that, the player will be charged 4 times roll of dice and 10 times roll of dice if electricity is also owned by the same person. And the same logic is applicable for electricity. And here we have chest array, which is the same as the chance array. We have the bonuses for player. There are bonuses for players, such as collect $20 or 40. And here we have. Here we have the chess class, which if the chosen card, which determines how much is player getting and what card, which bonus he will be granted with. And here we have class jail, where we create current prisoners with MTLA, and afterwards if somebody will go to jail and somebody will go to jail, the array will be pushed. And here we create an array of regular streets. We have 8 types of regular streets, and here we create the train station.
Yeah, so the main, the most important array here is map. Map has 40 elements, and it stores every type, each and every type of the classes, arrays that we have created above. For example, our the map 0 is our go field, which I gave a type 8 to the map to that particular field, and then we have the regular street type of 1 from that array, the first element, which has the index 0. Then I think we have a chest, and it stores type 1, and so on. Here we have the entire map created in an array. Now let's continue with the game start function. We have left that the server there. Okay, game start function console logs into our console, and the four players are ready. The game has started because it's a multiplayer game, and we had to know definitely how many players are we writing for. We chose four, and yeah, whenever there are four players ready, this function execute. And at the beginning of the game, it's actually for sure it's player one's turn, but on the server side, like player one is player zero, and it doesn't matter. We say yeah. And remember, every player had every player had a variable of turn permission, and at the beginning, player zero, the turn permission for player zero is true, so it's player zero's turn. And then we are gonna call the your turn function. I'll talk about it later. Then we are going to create a set timeout function in which we say that after 250 milliseconds, you are going to tell the entire players that you're going to tell them who they are. It's going to emit know yourselves. It's going to give them their IDs, so every player every client knows that, for example, I'm the player one, is the player zero, and yeah, and we are going to update map info player positions. And at the beginning, it's everyone is on the first field. So yeah. Then we are gonna emit to our entire sockets that game started. And now let's talk about the your turn function. Let me. Okay, here it is. Your turn function. Your turn function gets an argument, gets a player, and it makes the function the turn permission for that player true. So it sets it changes the turn permission for the given player, and it's going to emit to that particular player that you know it's your turn, roll the dice, and it's going to set every other player's turn permission to false, and it's going to tell them whose turn it is. And it creates a turn time. It's a set timeout, after which, if the player hasn't played for like 30 seconds, it is going to change the turn. So for example, if the player one didn't play for like 30 seconds, automatically the turn is going to get to the second player, and it's going to call itself in that timeout. But if the player has actually moved, we are clearing the timeout created before. And yeah, and if the turn gets to, and if another player gets to play, we also again clear the timeout. So that was about the game start function, and yeah, then we are going to add our event handlers. Whenever one of the players says move the figure, every player can say move the figure whenever that they want, but the problem is whether they can or not. So we check if the game is over or not. If it's not over, we are continuing, and we check if the player sender that money is above zero, if actually the player went to bankrupt or not. If the player didn't go to bankrupt, we say we are going to continue, and we check whether the player is in jail or not. If it's not in jail, we are continuing and we are looking at okay, if it's in jail, we're gonna say that you are out of jail, but you are going to pay $50, and we set the in jail for our player to false. Then finally we check whether the turn permission, I mean the player had the turn permission to move. If it was his permission, we clear the turn time, and we are gonna we're gonna generate two random numbers from 1 to 6, and we're gonna move our player with that given numbers, for example like 7, 8, etc., and we are gonna send the dice results to that to our clients. Then we're gonna update the mapping for positions. And if it wasn't, however, if it wasn't his turn, but he still said move the figure, and we say, it's not your turn. It's not your turn, and we tell the client whose turn it was. And yes, and yeah, if the client doesn't have enough money, I mean, if the client is already in bankrupt, we say we are going to place his figure to the free park, because the free park is free park is a place that you don't have to pay money, so it's actually it's logical that you're gonna stay there. And we're gonna say to the player, you are broke, you can't move, or you are forced to move to the 20th to the 20th field. Okay, I forgot to say that whenever our player moves, it's going to we are going to tell the client that you have already moved, but now you have to like the field that you are in has to function. It has to do some action. So we aim it to the client that are you ready to kind of are you ready to see the action of the field? If the client responds with field action ready, we are going to give the turn to the other client, and we're gonna actually check the type of the field that the client is on. For example, if it's 5, if it's 4 is chance, chest, income tax, etc. We are giving the entire logic of this particular fields in this place. We are checking with else ifs, and if the most interesting part is here, if the type is 0, which is street, we are gonna check whether the street is owned by anyone or not. If it's not owned by anyone, we are gonna our field is going to ask the client whether the client wants to buy it or not, and we are gonna give the client 15 minutes to answer, 15 seconds to answer this question. If the client responds with yes, we are going to do the stuff, and responds with yes, and the client has enough money. We are gonna give that particular field to our client property, and then we are going to update the player info, which is going to update the client's information about himself, so he's able to understand that he bought and he already owns that. And else, if it doesn't have enough money, we again clear the buying answer timeout because they actually answered, and we say you can't afford, and the turn gets to the other player. And if he says no, it's the same. We say to clear the timeout, and we give the. But actually, if it's not owned by anyone, if it's owned by someone, the client has to pay the rent for that particular field. So the money gets minus from the the player's money, and is going to give the money is going to get to the owner of the house. And update, we are going to update two player information. The sender, whoever the sender was, I mean, if the client landed on a field, and we are going to update his information because he gave some money, and we are going to update the owner of that, the information of that owner, because he actually got money, so he has to know that he got money. And here is the same, almost the same logic for electricity and waterworks, and and train stations. And else, if it's not the client's turn, we are gonna say that it's not your turn, and you have to, it's not your turn, you have to wait. And the last event listener is house number, hotel number, and we are gonna give the house number, hotel number of that particular field that was requested.
So here we have an canvas.js file which is responsible for every time updating the player position. So as you can see here, we have a function player position update which gets on canvas, which is our Monopoly picture actually, then field number and player image, which can be 0, 1, 2 or 3. So first of all, we have our initial position of our tools, which are x is 631 and y is 650. This, when the game starts, we have these positions. Then we have from 0 to 10 that y coordinate is standing still, and x is changing by 58, because we have calculated that our normal card space is 58 pixels. Then we have else if written for field number 10, because as you can see in the field number 10, 20 or 30, we have bigger card spaces than our normal card spaces like community chests, chances and avenues. And the same for from 10 to 20. Here our x is standing still and y is only changing. And why we have written field number mode to 10? Because we can have a 12 field number, and we want to only 2 times change our y. That's why field n, if field n is 12, so 12 mode 10 will have an 2.
So in our index.html file we have two canvas. The first one is our main canvas in which the game is going on, and the second one is a canvas that contains additional information about game progress. So in this canvas helper.js file we have 4 functions. First is your turn animation, then not your turn animation, and then whose turn, and eventually out object. So let's consider your turn animation function. Firstly, it gives colors, red, orange, yellow, and here is written the position where these colors are given, and then it clears the canvas and adds background color almost black, and then it fills the canvas and with font Verdana and text size of 75 pixels. Its output text, it's your turn, and then it set time out 2000 milliseconds, and after which the text disappears. In the same way are written the other 3 functions.
So here we use a React library for dynamic objects in our game. And JavaScript uses JS6 extension, which means that it's not a valid JavaScript, but after we have to compile it into valid JavaScript so we can use it. And on the first line of the code, we require React, and on the second line of code, we require React DOM. And here we have canvas. So we create a class money, which extends React.component, and we have constructor here, which sets the initial state. And here we have render function, where we say that this dot money in the constructor equals to money, which we have in main.js, and it returns the div this dot money, so it will show the money player has. And we know that it changes, so it will change every time player purchases something or gets money from chance field. And here we are rendering the class money and getting element by ID money div, which we indicated in index.html. And here we create another class which has the name main dropdown, and it extends React.component as well. Every class in React extends React.component actually. And here we have constructor, where we say that we create new array called content, and we create for loop where the index equals 0, and when the index is smaller than length of the field, we are adding one length. This is for drop down of streets, so player can actually see what streets are in the game and information about them. And here we have onChange function, which lets us to select the field, and we creating the canvas with the onChange function. So when player chooses the street, it will change the coloring of the main canvas. And here we have render function, which returns the content. And here we have a class called card, and in the constructor we have this.text and this.style, and we set style in a constructor, so we can't use it in a return function. And this .text equals card text, which we have in main.js, and it renders here we just render the card class. And here we have a class called box, which has the style element in it, and has this.t element in it, and style for paragraph. And here we just set yes or no for purchases, if player wants to purchase the street, or he or she doesn't want to purchase it. So here we have functions for it, which calls from main.js. And here we have render function. Yeah, I forgot that we set timeout. If the player is not purchasing some street, after it just says that the player doesn't want to purchase it. And here we render all the data above, and we have the similar classes for my picture and property info, which repeat the same, which are built the same way as our other classes above. And property dropdown, which shows the property of the player possesses. And here we have the dice results, class called dice results, which renders the result of the dice player has.
So this is our main client-side file, and it begins with a function EO, which connects our server, which connects our client to the socket server. Then we have the images of our players. And so let's begin. Here we have a socket on player info update, and which gets some player data in which we have money and property. So why we have used window.money and window.property, it's for global variables, so we can use it everywhere, the variables money and property. And then we have also functions render money and render property drop down. So these functions have been written in the React component file. So then we have a socket on dice results, which gets dice 1 and dice 2, and again with windows D1 and D2. And here also we have a render dice results, after which we have the same for the get the card, in which we have text. And then we have our main function, which is our window on load. This function is working whenever all our files are loaded in the browser. So when onload function is working, the dice button moves from the left to the right. Here we have written 100 plus canvas width pixels. Then this function also updates the info of the players, so the map data and player images after each turn and after each change. And also it clear rect, so every time it images again. And it also have tools with it, which are, for example, whose turn, which is identifying who will play now. Then a game started. When the game started, what we need to do. It's your turn, not your turn, imprisoned by me, can't afford, and so on.
So in this file we have information about map, and firstly we create an array of objects called field, and each element of the array has some information about map. Firstly, for example, let's consider index 0. It has name, which is in this case starting point. You get $200 every time you pass. It has a color, and if the owner is null, you can afford that field. And then the source is also null. In the end of this code, we will see how we give values to source, and then each index is houseable is true, and for each field we write this information, and if it is affordable, firstly the owner is no one, and when someone affords it, it changes, and then we have a for loop with the length of fields, which is 39 and 40, and by this loop we give images to each of those fields, as we have a folder called images, image cards, and each image in that folder is named 0, 1 up to the 39.